Well, what do we have here? Another Phantasy Star video by yours truly. Who could have seen this coming? Don't answer that. It was rhetorical. I apologize for the wait. I originally wanted to upload this sooner, but after very careful consideration, the Secret Council and I agreed that it would be for the best if I pushed it back a bit. You see, in the famous words of World of Warcraft creator and McDonald's franchise owner, the Shigster, a delayed video is eventually great, but when Cyberbolt releases one too early, no cap, that shit ain't bustin', for real, my nigga. I wanted to make this video the best one yet. So I put about a year's worth of blood, sweat, coffee, tears, and semen into it. Okay, well, maybe not the last one. I'm not down with the ERP scene, but either way, cum guzzler or not, I think you'll enjoy this. And I hope it pisses off the same people like last time, especially the deranged community moderators and staff. The last video really rustled their jimmies, because despite their best efforts misleading people who were curious about my video, banning anyone who discussed it, and blacklisting it on every official PSO2 community, it did pretty well, and it's all thanks to you guys. Your likes, comments, and shares really helped out a lot. Without you, the algorithm wouldn't have picked it up. So, thanks for spreading it around. Just please make sure you don't spread anything else. A lot has happened since we last spoke. It's way too much to go over now. All you really need to know, however, is that the people in charge are sick in the head, and they hand out bans as happily as sex offenders giving candy to kids on Halloween. As for me personally, I wasn't banned, yet. And that's what I originally wrote here in my script until June, when I was permanently banned for quote-unquote hacking. And when pressed for more information, Sega refused to elaborate. Anyway, it goes without saying that the Phantasy Star community is very unique. You say something about the game and you're either hailed as a saint for stating the obvious, or you're vilified because people can't handle criticism. On one hand, you have people who want to play NGS like the older games, chasing the highs of getting a rare drop, fighting cool monsters, and powering up their gear, and on the other, you have people who don't take their medication, install horsecock mods, and only play to have sex with each other. If it sounds like I'm a little bitter and annoyed, well, that's because I kind of am. Phantasy Star is going through an identity crisis, and people like me are in the minority now. I know this may come as a surprise, but when some of us log into NGS, instead of having sex, we actually play the game. We exhibit these strange behaviors because we're what you call gameplay chads, which are quite a rare sight nowadays. We don't treat this game like anime Second Life. We treat it as an action MMORPG, even though we clearly shouldn't. And because I actually play the game instead of role-playing as a prostitute in the game's red light district, I'm going to talk about it, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop me. First, I'll go through what happened following the last video, and then I'll go over how we got to this point. After that, I'll wrap up 2022 because if you recall, I never spoke about Stia, and then I'll dive into everything that happened this year, which includes personal experiences, outrageous technical issues, and community-related matters as well, because you can't have a PSO2 video without mentioning its player base. I'll finish the video with some closing thoughts about the game's future, the community, its management, and anything else I missed or didn't have a place for. Each segment is divided into their own chapter or episode, and the timestamps for each will be provided in the description down below. You're welcome. I'm gonna do my very best to cover everything, but if I miss something, please don't throw a shit fit. This script is way too long. If I covered literally everything that was added over the past year, we'd be here until the next. So, with all that out of the way, sit back, relax, get back up because you forgot your drink, and put that phone down. No one's gonna message you anyway. But most importantly, get comfy. Or try to. Because this is gonna be yet another long one. I honestly don't even know where to begin with this. I guess I could start by saying that the reception for the last video was mostly positive, but unlike the first one, the negative attention that it attracted was way worse. Along with being harassed, threatened, and slandered over a mostly lukewarm review, I was also attacked for exposing the truth behind a certain individual. At first I was going to cut this segment out, but after recent events I decided against it. The reason why I'm still bringing this up is because you need to be aware of how the community treats the people it doesn't like. If this isn't something that interests you, I don't blame you. Skip ahead to the next section. But if you're a regular of the community or want to see how vile and disgusting it can be, stick around. The Phantasy Star series, for whatever reason, has always attracted an excessive amount of high school level drama, but within recent times it's gotten much worse. Why? I don't know, but if you play long enough, whether you want it or not, at some point you'll find yourself getting involved in it. After my second video came out, for some time people were impersonating me, trying to paint me as a pedophile by taking things like web scraping websites out of context, and making edits of me saying things that would get me cancelled faster than a plane ticket to East Ukraine. The fact that someone went out of their way way to frame me as a pedophile or transphobe just because I made fun of their game and exposed their favorite micro-celebrity is really fucking sad. Especially the transphobic thing, because truthfully, I hate everyone equally. You all disgust me. But the people who label you transphobic for criticizing transgender people are starting to disgust me more. That bogus claim is the result of a segment from my last video where I spoke about the bad behavior of two people who happen to be transgender. Their gender was never the topic of discussion, and if you had half a brain cell, you could have figured that out by watching the video. But because some people are about as honest as used car salesmen and lack basic listening comprehension skills, they automatically assumed I only spoke ill of them because of their personal choices and not because of their shitty behavior. So, like the smart Alex they are, they started to push this false narrative about the video and what was said in it. They wanted to censor me because I exposed some people as manipulative, shady, hypocritical, and corrupt, and the easiest way to keep people from seeing the video was by saying it harassed someone, and then lie about it being filled with transphobic remarks to further justify banning it everywhere. I've read a lot of other negative shit too, most of it failing to even address what was said in the video. A lot of people just show up, comment that I'm toxic, and refuse to elaborate, as if it means anything, or claim that I have no right to criticize anyone while they criticize me. They also never fucking spell my name right, a clear indicator that they didn't watch the video, but instead are playing phone, parroting what other people say while they butcher my name until it's unrecognizable. I'm curious to see how far it'll go this time. I don't know why this happens, or why people go to such great lengths to defend those who harm the game in its community. Are they afraid to agree with me because they fear retaliation, or are they secretly friends with these people and do the same thing? Either way, they're pussies. When it comes to all the lies I've read, I think my favorite is how I apparently spent half of the last video, meaning an hour, and in some cases people claim even more, attacking the community manager and the global moderation team. Now, if you're going to label that segment an attack and not a defense as a result of baseless claims, at least get one of these right. The timing or the topic. That part was what, 10 minutes long I think? And it only went over the community manager's past behavior because someone's alt account popped up to accuse me of slander. I didn't just wake up one day and decide I'm going after them. I brought up what happened initially in the first video because I noticed some shady things were happening. Then later, when I was called out over doing that, I doubled down because the evidence was there. I used it to prove I wasn't pulling anyone's leg. And if the result of proving my innocence made someone else look bad, well, maybe they shouldn't have done bad things to begin with. You ever think about that? Probably not. Anyway, this outrageous talking point about half of the video being a hit piece originated from the moderator Daddy Juve, who continues to lie about having watched the video to this day. This guy's got a few loose screws. Talk to just about anyone in the community and they'll have something to say about him. The most common would be that he's trigger happy with his bans, and that he takes his job way too seriously. He's also a huge hypocrite. While he's not a Sega employee, he is a moderator for the game who's supposed to uphold its rules, yet he and some of the others that have a leash on the community hang out on the modding Discord server. He even tells other people that Sega doesn't care about data mining, which is very false. They sue people over that. His hypocrisy doesn't end there, however. For example, in one of his older tweets, he implies that all conservatives are pedophiles, but yet in another, he says that calling someone a pedophile without proof could land you in court for defamation. Typical Discord mod projection, if you ask me. He's probably crying about being in the video right now, downplaying the severity of being caught. Then again, based on previous events, Sega doesn't really seem to care about whether or not you break the rules, as long as you're on their side. Either way, this guy is crazy, and so is the next person I need to make money off of. Shortly after my last video went up, someone joined my Discord server and started bothering me about GWiz. They specifically made an account to do this. After some time they went away, but I would always find them coming back whenever GWiz was mentioned, like a moth, unable to resist a flame. And they barely spoke about anything else. On all the other servers they joined, like the modding server for instance, they never said a single thing, unless they were trying to paint me in a bad light. I humored them because I found it funny someone would spend hours at a time defending another person. I'm not even kidding when I say this. This guy sat around for almost a year, sometimes replying to weak old posts just to defend GWiz. And in most cases, brought up the topic themselves. From my sporadic and unpleasant interactions with this person, it was clear they didn't like me very much. And when talking with them, they seemed to know a little bit too much about GWiz. Their personal life, their work, their habits, their interests, and even things they've said on stream, to a concerning and suspicious degree. It was a constant back and forth with this person until they threatened to dox me after after I was banned in June. Now, I engage with people that don't like me, but when you threaten me with something that could lead to physical issues like getting swatted or something, that's where I draw the line. And before they did that, they spent hours deleting all their posts so there wouldn't be a paper trail. Good thing I got these screenshots. The only time they decided to tag me directly was on Guilded, a better alternative to Discord by the way, where they asked me if I played the game recently right before I found out I was banned, almost as if they knew it was coming. Shortly after that disaster, some of my viewers took to Reddit to spread awareness of my ban. In the Asmongold subreddit, a bunch of posts from a alt account that hasn't been used in a while started defending GWiz by using the same deep knowledge, talking points, and sentence structure as the Discord account. The smileys also made an appearance again, and like a repeat of the last time, this defensive post even received Reddit awards shortly after going up, a clear sign that this was intentional and likely someone's secondary account. This person knew way too much, and I assume is also the same person who kept tabs on me throughout the year, like that little bitch Randall from that Disney show Recess. I watched that thread and took some screenshots. Some of the more brutal comments are gone, deleted by moderators, just like the thread. I guess the infighting was too much for them. But then again, this kind of drama is what Asmongold viewers feed on. It's kind of amazing how no bigger YouTuber has covered this shit show yet. They really should. It would be a great topic. Anyway, back to that Reddit thread. One thing in particular that stuck out to me was that this person said GWiz hasn't visited 4chan since that one instance. Playing devil's advocate here, let's say it was true. How would they know this? And more importantly, if they're going to defend GWiz, why lie and make them look worse? They still visit the PSO2 threads on 4chan, which by itself isn't really an issue. It's just that people just keep lying that they don't when they actually do. And the most blatant proof of this would be when they reposted a clip from a private stream that only circulated on that website, days after it was mentioned in this Reddit thread, and then even replied to their own post saying they'll force inject people with estrogen or something, which is basically word for word what people were saying on 4chan.
Kind. I mean, like, in the future, everyone will have estrogen in their bodies as their primary hormone. Eventually, everyone.
Or else, this is the future the liberals want.
No, this is the future that will happen. Because I'm pushing the agenda.
I'm really starting to believe that this year-long damage control campaign was led by GWiz. All signs point to it, including the name and profile picture of the Discord user, Hornian, which is GWiz's self-proclaimed favorite NGS character, and one that they retweeted sexual content of on the game's official Twitter account. I'm really trying to give them the benefit of the doubt in every way I can. I don't think they're this stupid, but at the same time, it's hard to believe they're not involved in any of this to some degree. They've shown in the past that they're willing to seek people out in other places to scare them or get revenge. So going to this length to defend yourself is not something I would put past them. One theory I have is that someone else who hates me did all this to stir drama and make GWiz look like a victim again. Another makes me believe that this person hates the both of us and just wanted to watch a show. I honestly think this is the more likely of the two, but I still have my doubts because I don't think someone who hates GWiz would become an encyclopedia on them or spend a year investigating, documenting, and antagonizing people on their behalf. That's just kind of far-fetched. It's something a terminally online person would do to defend themselves. At least that's my view on it anyway.
Alert. 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 This harassment segment is now over. Please proceed to the nearest Discord server to cry about it. Before sending your message, ensure that you have correctly typed the amount of time that Cyberbolt has spent harassing these individuals. It is everyone's responsibility to stop misinformation from spreading. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, you little bitch.
Let's go over my ban now, which everyone knows is bullshit. I wasn't banned for hacking. They just hit me with that because it's an accusation you can't really argue against or receive sympathy for. Think about it. When someone says that they were falsely banned for hacking, what's your first thought? They're full of shit and deserve it? Yeah, same here. And that's why they issued it to me. So everyone else would think the same thing. They did it to try and damage my credibility. But the thing is, it didn't work. By the way, Sega still hasn't told me the real reason behind my ban. When I politely asked what the deal was, I only got one response from a customer service rep, who told me that elaborating further would violate the game's terms of service. Anyway, the only other thing they said was to consult the in-game ban reason for more information, which doesn't really help either because that one lists everything someone could have done and then tells you to contact customer support. All I know for sure is their non-answer says enough. Sending people in an endless circle is how companies politely tell tell you to fuck off. The only thing is, while other people get annoyed at this shit and eventually leave it alone, I don't, because I'm kind of autistic. If I received a legit response, I may have scripted this video differently, but because Sega refused to work with me here, all bets are off. What we can take away from this interaction is, we shouldn't expect things to get any better. The immature reaction to my video is a silent testimony to that. What they've essentially done signals to everyone on a global scale that management can't take the pressure. It suggests to anyone with even the slightest bit of common sense that the company isn't confident in their product or employees. A company that values itself and what it offers wouldn't have been fazed by what I said, or let things get to this point for that matter. But because some people were bothered by what the loud YouTube man said, they suicided his account with a shot to the back of his head. Yes, I'm Dr. Seuss now. But seriously, if this childish, retaliatory hissy fit from Sega is anything to go by and becomes a trend going forward with anyone who criticizes them beyond please don't do that, NGS will soon find itself stuck with another stigma. It's bad enough the game is already seen as a disaster, but to be known as a game ran by people who retaliate against their players over criticism, that's a death sentence. And what's crazy is, it isn't as far off as you'd think. I mean, we're kind of already there. The fact that I was banned proves it. The good thing is, aside from the most extreme bootlickers, no one actually believes I did anything wrong, including Sega, who still hasn't banned my new account yet, but they probably will after this video. If you've watched my content before, you'd know that I have a low tolerance for people who break the rules, so I'm not even gonna really bother defending myself here. I'm just gonna move on. However, I will say one thing. If Sega does decide to reveal what they banned me for, I hope what they choose to lie about is something that their staff and moderators aren't guilty of. Because let me tell you, the double standards are real. Regardless of what they say, if they say anything at all, we need to face the facts. My ban happened because I embarrassed the company. I went down the rabbit hole. I exposed corruption, and overall hurt their bottom line by bringing attention to it all. And because they banned my account, I'm gonna do it again. Stay tuned for Chapter 5, or Episode 5, whatever it is. Or skip ahead, you won't want to miss it. So, to quickly recap on what's happened up until now, with the game anyway, the first few months for NGS were a complete disaster. As if I haven't used this line enough already. The servers? Shit. The little content available was super tedious, the story was near non-existent, and important features that have been well established in the franchise, like parties giving bonus experience, were months or even years away from being implemented. The game's issues found their way into the real world as well, specifically with computer hardware. In my case, the game's poor optimization at launch fried my graphics card, and more recently, corrupted part of my hard drive, but I'll get to that later. In retrospect, I was fortunate enough to walk away with just that. Some people, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. For example, when the game first released on PC, some players reported that their hard drives were getting wiped after installing the game through the Microsoft Store. Something else that would be wiped clean were player accounts from all the bugs that were present. At times, it felt like doing anything would put your character at risk and shave hours, if not days, off of your progression. Now, obviously, I don't intend to cover everything about the game's launch period. If you want to learn more about that, you can watch the first video in this trilogy. But if you don't feel like giving me more ad revenue, that's okay too. Just know that these issues I mentioned were the most blatant and detrimental. They greatly affected the average player and definitely hindered the game's early adoption rate, which resulted in the game's reputation tanking even before I helped. To put it as politely as I can, 2021 was fucking garbage.
Know your fucking place, trash.
You'd have more fun getting run over by a truck than playing NGS around this time. 2022, on the other hand, now that was much better. Most of the issues were addressed or being worked on, the servers were fixed, and the game received 3 new regions, albeit at a snail's pace. Slowly but surely, features were finally making their way over from the base game, and in some cases even being improved upon, and to the surprise of many, NGS finally, after what seemed like forever, released on PS4 in the West, which was something everyone deemed impossible. Things were starting to look up, but of course not everything was perfect. Most of the game's downtime was filled with copy-pasted limited time events that begged you to log in every day, despite the player base and Sega insisting you shouldn't. These events mostly served as a shortcut to NGS's endgame, giving the casuals and newer players an easier way to obtain high-level gear, which not only resulted in players being unfamiliar with the game's many upgrading systems, but also discouraged the more serious players from grinding, since what they got for free was really good. More and more systems were being built on top of one another, with with little thought put into how bloated the game might be, and the content meant to serve as endgame activities were abandoned by both the players and developers in record time. To make matters worse, the player base, despite Sega's best efforts, failed to increase by any noticeable margin. New players would show up, but would leave shortly after, either because they were overwhelmed with everything that was thrown at them, or they were pushed away by Sega's greedy monetization practices. These negatives I just went over are still present, by the way. Over the last year, nothing really changed. The game is more or less in the exact same spot, except now we have a bit more story and a new feature only a fraction of the player base used. I concluded the last video by saying NGS wasn't as much of a disaster as before, so the question now is, does that opinion still hold? Well, yes, but with some caveats. As we go through 2023, I think you'll be able to tell what these issues were. But the point of this video isn't to determine whether or not 2023 was any better. It's to answer the question on everyone's mind. Will NGS always be a disaster? And in order to figure that out, we have to pick up from where we left off. So, let's get into it. To the surprise of many, the new region, Volcalio, sorry, Stia, and definitely not Staya, don't worry, I checked, was a bit different. It came with all the bells and whistles we're familiar with when it comes to new regions, but the overall level design was more linear. It felt like an oversized base PSO2 dungeon, and most of the player base, myself included, actually preferred this. Stia was by no means perfect, however. This drastically different region design brought with it issues found nowhere else. And the biggest one by far was, ironically, the size of it. Because despite being similar in size to Kavaris and Ratem, only half of the land was accessible. For better and worse, Stia was more condensed than the other regions, to a very claustrophobic degree at times. This feeling of suffocation really comes to fruition when you encounter a map barrier, which isn't as uncommon as you'd think. They're pretty much everywhere. They always pop up at the most inconvenient time, and tease me with what could have been. Their overabundance led many players to speculate that Stia would see an expansion later on, letting players venture out further into the surrounding hellscape. But still to this day, almost a year later, nothing like that happened. Looking past the small map area, the other most frequent complaint expressed was simply there wasn't enough to do, even more so than usual. The only activity players could engage in would be hunting gigantics. There weren't any new mechanics introduced or even trials added as far as I'm aware. There was also little reward for exploring. Not that exploration rewarded you with much to begin with, but still, in Stia, there's really no reason to go off the beaten path, even if you could. I didn't expect Stia to be so small, or as scorching as the trailer made it out to be. See, it's one thing to see a game's environment in a promotional video, but it's another to experience it for yourself. Stia is fucking hot, like my character, but surprisingly, not hot enough to cause heat stroke. And thank God, because I really didn't feel like dealing with harsh weather conditions just to experience endgame content. And that's to my character's benefit, because if that wasn't the case, she'd be boiling alive in that armor, and it would be terrible. Getting all hot and sweaty. Oh man, that would suck, wouldn't it? When it comes to Stia's art direction and environmental design, it's top-notch like every other region. Igneous rock towers overhead, forming natural walls and giving you places to rest as you cross rivers of lava, molten rock rains down from the sky, pools of skin-melting spaghetti sauce burn your tongue, and the region, like the others, has several exclusive weather patterns, giving the area a very distinct feel. It's just a shame that each of Stia's individual sectors don't do the same. One of my personal gripes with Stia is, everything looks the same and you can't really gauge where you are without referencing the map. There are no landmarks to determine your exact location, aside from the central volcano, which doesn't really help either in this case because every playable area is located at the base of it. Of course, this isn't the case all the time, like when you're at the Dracen plant or at the outpost, but you get what I mean. The region's black and red color scheme is another thing I have an issue with. It makes dealing with enemies sometimes a real pain in the ass, especially when they enter their rage mode, because just like in Kavaris, and especially Lost Central, the enemies blend way too much into the background. That being said, keeping track of the enemy here is a bit more manageable, but it's still very annoying nonetheless, especially on higher settings. Like, holy fuck, am I playing NGS or am I welding? Another flaw that Stia has is universal to every region. It only has 1 or 2 areas worth visiting, those being the combat zones. At least after the second one came out anyway. I guess we should talk about the outpost now. It's personally my favorite so far. I like the tight-knit feel of it. It's believable in the context of the story, and is very cozy despite being in the outskirts of a volcano. It's chaotic, claustrophobic, and sheltered in a crevice. You can tell this thing was put together on short notice. Tents are pitched everywhere, there's a makeshift gun range, a transport ship is at the ready. It's great. All these little details convey a sense of urgency and danger. Stia is a war zone, and this is clear from the moment you arrive. And if you were paying attention to the game's story, you would have known that a bit sooner. This chapter starts after we return from Kvaris. It opens with a short conversation between the main three regarding Manon's odd behavior, which has been bugging Aina for a while. Manon finally admits that she's troubled and that her hesitancy and spaciness stems from dwelling on the fight to come. As you and Aina reassure Manon that she's a little bitch who should take her anxiety meds, you're summoned by one of Crawford's concubines. Crawford briefs us on the situation at hand. We'll be heading out to Stia to meet with some ARCS members who are trying to gain control of the region, but not before being introduced to the main characters of this part of the story, Sasuke and his robo-waifu Kanui. Shortly after crossing the treacherous empty bridge, the group is ambushed by the advance team, wanting to test the skill of their new backup before sending them into action. From there, you head back to the outpost and proceed to help Glenn and Kanui uncover the mystery of the region, find out how it relates to the dolls, and regain control of it one zone at a time. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but I'm trying to keep things spoiler-free here. The two new characters, Glenn and Kanui, are polar opposites. Glenn doesn't like talking very much, unless he's brooding over something, and Kanui's a chatterbox who cares way too much for Sasuke's well-being. Glenn's the skilled powerhouse of the team, but often lets his emotions get the better of him. Kanui plays more of a support role, being level-headed and making sure everyone doesn't get into trouble. The dynamic between the two works well. They each cover each other's faults. I don't really have any grievances with them, aside from Glenn being the stereotypical edgelord. The trope is just really tiring at this point. He's literally Sasuke. I mean, look, he has a Rasengan. Without getting into spoilers, I can understand why Glenn is more reserved, and when faced by his nemesis, why he loses his composure. Like everyone else, he's been through a lot of shit. He copes with his losses in his own way, but that's what makes him a somewhat believable character. Unlike everyone else, it actually feels like he's not a dirty robot, like Kanui. I know a lot of people rag on the game's writing, and rightfully so, but Glenn's wasn't that bad. Kanui, on the other hand, she got shafted, and no, not in that way. Nothing really went on with her. She didn't get any character development. All she did was explain everything. Let's talk about Stia's enemy selection now. As I predicted, dolls are the main focus here, as if I expected anything else at this point, and I guessed right when I said they'd use flamethrowers. But let's be real, if you didn't see that one coming, you're kind of retarded.
Alert. 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 Cyberbolt has said the R slur again. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Of course, these attacks inflict a status ailment because why wouldn't they? But thankfully, being set on fire doesn't result in you losing control of your character. That freeze ray shit was so obnoxious in Kvaris. Obviously, other new enemies were introduced, like this guy, and I think this guy, I can't really tell. They all look the fucking same to me. And then we also have these things that alert other enemies, except they never seem to do for some reason. And we also have the Recon Gigantics, which are Gigantixified, I guess that's a word now, regular dolls that hang around at the most inconvenient places. As their name would suggest, they perform reconnaissance by walking around the map looking for erotic role players. They drop materials for the region-specific craftable weapon, and when you kill enough of these, they trigger a normal Gigantics to spawn who also drops said crafting materials. At least that's what I'm told. Out of all the new enemies introduced in Stia, my favorite without a doubt is the Jimmy Rustler himself, Goku, or as I like to call him, Poopy Joe.
Holy shit, was that a TF2 reference?
Doldoris, Blazentos, and Nils are pretty cool too, but nothing tops Sun Wukong, who honestly doesn't show up as much as he should. Similarly to Ritem and Kvaris, Stia was released with two urgent quests, one for Doldoris and the other Nils. The Doldoris fight is more straightforward, pitting you up against him right away. The Nils fight, on the other hand, is more involved, making you fight through waves of enemies before reaching the boss. Out of the two, I prefer this one because of its uniqueness. While you're pushing through each wave, the boss attacks you from a distance and you can't fight back. The devs used Nils' height to their advantage, and this simple concept of a boss interfering with a fight it's not even involved in yet puts a really fun twist on an otherwise stale dungeon run. This aspect, combined with mowing down waves of enemies, just reminds me of one of my favorite boss fights from episode 4. Another reason why I enjoy this one more than the other is because despite it being the busier of the two in my opinion, ironically it's not as much of a clusterfuck. See, every time I play the Doldoris quest, I get matched with people who have some sort of mental deficiency. It's like every time I play that one, my brilliant teammates telepathically agree to never focus on the weak points, and if for some reason a ranger is present, they forget the blight rounds exist, unless I'm playing a ranger too, in which case they do remember they exist, but then they apply them to literally everything that they're not supposed to. I swear to fucking god, my clear times on the Doldoris fight are usually pushing 30 minutes or more, mostly because all the party wants to do is attack the drill. In the few instances that I managed to convince people to attack the legs, we're able to shave off on average at least 10 minutes, and in some cases more, because when you attack the legs, you can get several downs in a row on top of the extended down that happens normally. Something else I religiously have to do is remind people to hit the generator on its back. You know that fucking glowing yellow brick that pulsates? The one you can't miss unless you're blind? Yeah, that. Now, I can understand trying to convince people to attack the legs. These people may not know any better, since all they do is flirt with each other. But convincing them to attack the generator? Come on, it's been 2 years and you handicapped fucks still can't figure out what weak points are? Is this what happens when most of your player base AFKs in Central City? Did they all just forget basic video game mechanics? It's not even video game mechanics, it's like literal common sense. Even gaming journalists are familiar with this. What, do I have to enable cut-ins and use them to guide my teammates? Fucking Christ, I think I'm gonna have a heart attack.
Alert. 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 Cyberbolt has had a heart attack. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Okay, I'm back. Let's go over cocoons now, which may put me back in the hospital. But at least when talking about these, I'm not bitching about other people. There's only 3 or 4 if you count the tower, and they're pretty much boring. One of them has you run in a circle, sidestepping easy obstacles as you climb up something, and that's pretty much the only one I remember, aside from the one that lets you visit in Goku, which is my favorite, because I like hanging out with him. The only other thing worth bringing up is the region-specific crafting material, Infernium. This is Stia's equivalent of Blizzardium, only more reasonable to obtain. Gathering enough of these lets you build an 8-star Clucophis weapon, one of the best looking series by far. They remind me of Desperado LLC from Metal Gear Rising. These look great on my character, and in the end, that's all that really matters, right?
Just as I'd expect from the infamous Cyberbolt. Did you think you could really get away with spreading misinformation in your video? Pray tell, did you just refer to this weapon series as the Clucophis weapons? You absolute buffoon. These are not the Clucophis weapons, they are the effulgent weapons, with the Queen as my witness. May God rest her soul. How could you mislead your viewers so? Don't you have any shame? You speak highly of yourself, but you are no better than the porn-addicted gamblers that shovel their paychecks to Sega. I hope you're happy with yourself, for one day you will look back on this moment and ask yourself, where did I go so wrong? How could I do such a thing? Why did I have to resort to bringing the British guy back instead of re-recording? Why did I not save the original text-to-speech program from the first video? How could I stoop so low? It's because you're a lazy, good-for-nothing son of a bitch. I pray someone fists your ass, pulls out your intestines, and forces you to hang yourself with them. Jump in a volcano, eat broken glass, superglue your nutsack to a helicopter blade and fly with it, you worthless protozoic cockroach. You are no better than the dirt under my shoe. Your life is worthless. A flea provides more value than you. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
In summary, I think it's safe to say that Stia's reception was a mixed bag. Most people agree that the map felt too small, and they bitched over the lack of activities, but at the same time, I read that many people were just happy with it feeling more in line with the base game, which is further proof that they really need to get rid of the open world. It just doesn't work with what they're trying to do. Oh, and the fact that they learned from the Blizzardium controversy helped too. As for the story, in the later half anyway, it did feel a bit rushed, but it was action-packed and had some of the best fight choreography so far. It thankfully started wrapping things up and answering a few questions too. I'd expect that to happen after almost 2 years though. I'd like to think most people enjoyed it. I know I did, except when Manon started crying like a little bitch. Yeah, sorry. Spoilers. I know. We have more context to why she's like this now. She's important to the plot, but still, sometimes you just really hate a character. Anyway, was Stia just Volcalio in the end, like I speculated? I don't think so. It was bare bones on release, sure, but it was a step in the right direction, especially when it comes to endgame content. And most important of all, it didn't shove hoverboards in our face. Thank fucking God. Oh, and the music was good too. Before going over what was added this month, I think it's important that we set the stage for 2023. To accomplish this, we need to go back a week, so let's step into the time machine and punch in December 27th when Sega uploaded January's headline video. As usual, the video focused on what was coming next month, but because the new year was around the corner, Sega double-dipped. They used the later portion of the headline to showcase the upcoming roadmap, which led to a lot of controversy. Now, looking at the roadmap, you may ask yourself, what's the big deal? A roadmap is a good sign, and this one looks pretty good. I mean, there's a new class and a weapon, so what's the problem? Well, if you compare it to the last one, the new one mostly consisted of limited time events, and for some reason, only the global players saw nothing wrong with it, until of course a YouTuber said something, then everyone's opinion changed. 2 weeks after the headline came out, a content creator by the name of Criticaster Q uploaded a video titled, "Is NGS Going to Die in 2023?" In his video, he expressed his concerns because the roadmap wasn't filled with meaningful content, but instead FOMO. He prefaced everything by saying he believed Sega wasn't showing their entire hand, but at the end of the day, he still felt that the roadmap could have been so much better, especially if the focus of this year was addressing the game's main issues instead of creating content that would disappear after a week. Honestly, he had a very reasonable take, and as you'd expect from a video titled that, it got a decent amount of views. And because the game's other content creators have very little to ever talk about except for Carapi, who can make a video on the grass in NGS Entertaining, they all jumped on the "Is NGS dying" train, with many outright saying no. Suffice to say, copium was being prescribed at unprecedented levels. After all the videos came out, the community reception eventually shifted from roadmap good to roadmap bad, with many players saying they'll give the game by June to get its shit together, or else they'll take a hike. Taking another look at the roadmap, it's no wonder people were concerned. There's barely anything interesting on it, aside from the update in June. I mean, sure, you can argue that a new class and weapon are always welcome, but they lose their appeal quickly. The game's combat is stale. The attack strategy is always the same. Almost 3 years in and we don't have many photon arts at our disposal. And the enemies that we do get to fight are for the most part reskins. Taking all this into account, you can understand why new classes aren't usually seen as a big deal. The lack of noteworthy content on the roadmap is just one reason why the tentatively titled Ultra Evolution update caught everyone's eye. The main reason, however, is that the game was still in a bad state at this point, and a name like that implied something big. A lot of people thought that this update would be the one to fix NGS, like a mega patch or something, maybe even a Realm Reborn. But the reality was it ended up alienating a huge chunk of the game's core player base. I'll elaborate more on this later. Anyway, despite all the community speculation, Sega made it very clear from the moment the roadmap was revealed that while there was more to it than this, the main focus of the update would be the creative space.
Key content in this update includes the implementation of the creative space. Key content in this update includes the implementation of the creative space. Key content in this update includes the implementation of the creative space. Key content in this update includes the implementation of the creative space. Key content in this update includes the implementation of the creative space.
So now that you've been briefed on what the deal was with the roadmap and how the community reacted to it, you'll have a better understanding of why everyone was disappointed in June. It'll be some time before we get there, so let's move on. January is when I started playing NGS again. Like last time, I took another much needed break after finishing the video, and when I returned I had yet to reach Stia, so I spent some time leveling up in Kavaris to get my toes wet again, or frozen, get it because it's the snow region, finished up a ton of leftover client orders, finally unlocking the Kaisar weapons because Equalizer enemies would just never fucking show up for some reason, and participated in the seasonal events because there's always one going on. While doing so, I noticed that almost no one hangs out in Kavaris anymore, which made it very difficult for me to reach level 70. Now, before you say anything, yes, I know. I could have just done yellow triggers or spoke to Gaiden for that free 7 quintillion experience, but I hate doing yellows because they're fucking boring, and I wanted to save drowning and experience for another class I didn't really enjoy, like Waker, an ironic name for a class that puts me to sleep. In the end though, I put my pride aside and asked Gaiden for help like the little bitch I am. I couldn't stand the grind. And when I was finally able to reach Stia, I beelined my way there, and as I approached the end of the bridge, I ended up getting stuck in a loading loop that was apparently fixed last month. According to Sega, it only occurred if you entered Stia while crossing the bridge, which means at this point it only affected players who haven't unlocked the region yet, or anyone stupid enough to use the bridge more than once. Now, for some strange reason, despite unlocking the Ryuker device after crossing the bridge, and it even showing up on my map, I wasn't able to teleport to it, so the only chance I had to get into Stia was to walk across the bridge again and hope it wouldn't freeze. This would be the first instance in 2023 when the game started fucking me over. Anyway, 2 tries later, I still couldn't get in, so I did did what any smart person would do when faced with a bug like this. I stopped playing and didn't return until March. Now, with that aside, let's go over what the new year introduced. Mini episodes, a brand new combat sector in Stia, the Quartz Dragon ripped straight from the base game, and limited time events. But not just one, there was two events! The new combat sector was easily the highlight of this update. It essentially replaced recon giants as the endgame activity. The nuisance plant, or nuisance plant as I like to call it, is a giant room that pits you against every type of doll you've come across on your journey. It introduces several new combat mechanics as well, like purple explosions, I don't really know what to call these, and jump pads that boost your dive attack strength. And for some strange reason, despite being located in Stia, the room spawns bosses from the other 3 at a higher rate, which really annoyed me because when I finally got to experience Stia, because I didn't get to play when it first came out, I didn't really get to fight the region's bosses very much. In February, a new urgent quest was released, featuring Dark Falls, which included cutscenes that continued the story. Yeah, that's right, now they're continuing the story outside the story. A new 8-star weapon series tagged along with that quest, and a second VTuber collab came out as well. I don't know who any of these people are. I hate anime. Obviously, the urgent quest was the update's main appeal, and honestly, I did not expect to enjoy it. I very rarely use the term epic to describe something because I feel that Reddit ruined that word back in 2010, but nothing else encapsulates the experience. It's a really good fight from start to finish, and the scale of it is incredible. It works well with the open world, but unfortunately, I think this is literally the only thing that works well with the open world. It's also a bit too long for my tastes, but that's not really a big deal. What is how it loses its appeal after a few fights, much like every other boss battle. And it's not only because of the pathetic drop rates, there's just something inherently flawed with the boss fights in this game. The enemy movesets that change with each of the boss's phases are fine, the arenas that they take place in are okay too. I honestly think it's just the designs. They're so boring and samey. I went over this before in the last video, but every doll, regardless of size or shape, just looks the fucking same to me. And yes, there's a reason for that, but I don't think I need to elaborate on why fighting enemies that look the same may get boring, so let's jump into March. Something really important happened then. Wait, never mind, it was just a limited time event. Well, actually, there's more to it than that. March was when Sega announced that they'll be kneecapping the base game again. In June, coming with the Ultra Evolution update, they plan to remove several methods of farming star gems, one of the game's premium currencies. These proposed changes were not met with fanfare at all, in any capacity. I haven't seen one person happy with this change, even the people who never played the base game, which was already struggling to stay relevant. But with this, they're removing one of the biggest reasons to still play it, and arguably one of the better ways to obtain star gems. As a consolation prize of sorts, Sega would give players an additional way to receive them by completing weekly tasks that would only give a mere fraction of what they were taking away. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, on the same day, Sega also announced yet another controversial change, this time regarding daily and weekly task rewards. The changes they wanted to push would come into effect next month, and if left alone would further damage the game's shitty economy. Their plan involved reversing the current reward system, giving players more money for completing dailies over weeklies. This change in how the game distributed meseta resulted in casuals and new players being priced out of the market due to inflation favoring whales and those who played daily. And on top of that, some of the task requirements were changed too, mostly for the worst, like the one for the Urgent Quest, which originally asked you to only complete 1 per week, now it's 3. Still doable, but annoying because now you need to play more to make even less money, which further pushes away responsible adults who don't play video games all day. Luckily for me, even though I lost about 15 million meseta after I was banned, the inflation still hasn't affected me. I use a free base game outfit, accessory, and hairstyle, and when it comes to my gear, I couldn't care less. I get free handouts every other month that lets me play endgame content. I'm literally on NGS welfare. But anyway, the main reason why these changes were bad for the game was because it stops new players and casuals from getting what they want, fashion items for character customization, which is one of the game's main appeals. And if players can't get what they want in a reasonable amount of time, they'll go play something else, which is what the defenders of this change recommended when they saw other players complain. Which is hilarious to me because these same people, not even the day before, were the same ones insisting that NGS shouldn't be played every day. It's amazing how quickly the average consumer changes their opinion, isn't it? Check on the pizza in the oven. Wait, what?
Alert. 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 Cyberbolt has left the pizza in the oven. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
March is when I tried playing NGS again after the loading loop happened. Thankfully, I was able to get through this time. I started the story and everything went smoothly, until, yeah, there's always something, until I tried to finish it. As I'd approach the final boss, the game would shit itself, putting me in what I would assume is NGS purgatory. But the only issue here is that there are no people engaging in erotic roleplay, so I don't know, maybe this is heaven or something. This bug happened several times as I tried to finish the last mission, so I figured it might be another widespread issue, like the bridge. Research online resulted in nothing, so instead of waiting and hoping it would fix itself like the last issue, I took the initiative here and began troubleshooting by verifying the files on Steam, which made my life a living fucking hell for several days. This process would never finish. It would just hang at 100% every time, and in the off chance it did finish, it would begin verifying the files again if I tried to play it. Some people watching right now may be laughing at me for using Steam over the tweaker, but I assure you, if I could use the tweaker, I would. You see, the tweaker likes being temperamental with me. It hasn't worked for me since NGS was released, and even before that I would just use Steam and everything would be fine. So trying to fix it through that was not an option here. So I uninstalled the game, cleared out all the leftover files, and tried downloading it through Steam again. Big fucking mistake. Now the entire computer freezes whenever the game is downloading. Not installing, downloading. I tried everything, but nothing worked. Only way I could get the computer operational again is by restarting it with the power button, which could damage the parts. I made a few more attempts to download the game, but at random intervals it would just crash, even at 100%. So after going through this cycle God knows how many times, I tried downloading something else from Steam, just to see what would happen. And it worked. Any other game that I tried to download or even run worked without a problem. Only NGS was giving me this issue. With all of my other options exhausted, I reinstalled Windows. And one of the first things I did was install the tweaker. And look, NGS actually works now, but it won't go past the title screen. Are you fucking kidding me? At this point, my patience was running thin. I'd been trying to fix this for several days, and at this point, I had enough. I have never, in my entire life, dealt with software this uncooperative. Sony Vegas, the video editing software that I use, is notorious for crashing. It performed better than NGS. I almost thought it wasn't worth fixing, but then I remembered I'd be letting people down if I didn't push through this personal hell I've created. So, what fixed the issue in the end? Well, you're not gonna believe it, but all it took was using a different hard drive. Yeah, I don't get it either. I had absolutely no issue with that hard drive until I hit Stia. How the fuck did this even happen? I've never in my life seen anything like this, where one program would just not install at all on a specific hard drive, despite running fine on it before. And I've been fixing computers for years, for almost like 15 years now. I don't think this happened because the hard drive is dying, by the way. I still use it to this very day. So whatever the cause of this issue was, has never been discovered. But at this point, I'm convinced that the update back in December corrupted some part of my hard drive. There's just no other explanation for this. Chalk it up to Japanese programming, I guess. April was a very busy month. Along with celebrating the game's second anniversary, Sega released a new class that brought back a weapon that's a fan favorite. They also added new high-level quests, improved a bunch of features, implemented the controversial task reward changes mentioned last month, and added the final chapter to the first arc's story, which was honestly the best yet. I'll keep spoilers to a minimum here, unlike Sega, who exposed the big reveal during the headline announcement. We finally learn about what the deal is with Halfa, Man, and the floating thing in the sky, and the dolls. It introduced a new region, kind of, if you can call it one, which, while very streamlined, was a lot of fun because it felt like a base PSO2 dungeon, even more so than Stia. I personally think this chapter ended on a high note. One scene in particular, we all know which one, was really fucking hype. Anyone new experiencing the story from this point on will likely have a good time, unlike the most of us who had to sit through 2 years of drip-fed content. In retrospect, the only part that felt lackluster to me was Ratem, and even then, now that I'm thinking about it, it wasn't really that bad. I was being a little overcritical, probably because I was frustrated at the time, like everyone else. If you're watching this and haven't played NGS for some reason, that's kind of weird, but you have to keep in mind that the story moved slower than a special ed kid with broken legs. Holy fuck, that's mean. We'd wait about 6 months for 30 minutes of cutscenes. It took 2 years to conclude the first chapter. You can see why we were annoyed. For what it's worth though, episode 1 was decent. A bit of a slog in the beginning, but pretty good towards the end. Here's hoping episode 2 is better, and concludes before the game goes under. The other major addition to this update was the Slayer class, which, Hold on, let me check my notes. Oh yeah. Slayer uses the fan-favorite Gunblade, taking advantage of both melee and mid-ranged attacks. To say it's flashy would be the understatement of the century. This thing is very busy. The amount of visual clutter it adds to the game is incredible. In fact, I'm surprised no one sued Sega over having a seizure. The 3 main skills, including its Photon Blast, use new particle effects that cover the entire screen. They look cool, but they don't actually feel impactful. Thankfully, they only show up for the player that's using them. I don't know what I'd do if they didn't. I don't really enjoy this class. The moveset is really weird. It feels like the attacks don't connect properly and I'm never doing what I'm supposed to. Even after hitting level 70, I still feel like I'm disabled. I still forget what certain abilities do. Everything changes depending on the direction you're holding. It's a bit obtuse. The primary attack, that sucks, and the 2 charge attacks feel very odd to use, especially the more powerful one because it locks you in place. The weapon action doubling as your melee attack and dodge is unnecessary. I'd much rather prefer it doing only one thing. It should just really switch your weapon mode like it does in the base game, but giving players what they want is the least of Sega's concern. I really wasn't expecting much with Slayer. From the get-go, I already planned on being disappointed, and I can happily say I was. I mean, not for nothing, but when you release a flashy trailer with an aesthetic and music choice that doesn't even target your main demographic, while also not properly showing off the abilities, you can't really expect anything good. It's like they were trying to hide everything, with awkward camera angles and fancy visual effects. God, what a fucking terrible trailer. They should just crucify whoever put this together, and drop whoever came up with dual quests into a river. These new activities require tailor-made gear to complete, and forced many to shovel money into building a second set of endgame equipment, which isn't cheap. If money going down the drain wasn't bad enough, acquiring the necessary augments were a very time-consuming process. They were time-gated behind urgent quests, which would only show up every few hours. They were also purchasable through the seasonal event, at a whopping 30,000 points each. Yikes. The worst part about these fights, though, is that they weren't even unique in the slightest. They were just timed battles against stronger versions of monsters you've already fought before. Most people, myself included, didn't even bother with this shit because, simply put, the grind wasn't worth it. Dual quests are clearly for the hardcore players, which make up a very, very small minority. I honestly don't even understand why Sega even bothered with these. The audience for them simply isn't there. May was, for the most part, uneventful. The second half of the ongoing anniversary campaign was underway, and that's pretty much it, just more of the same. That is until May 10th, when a peculiar and alarming announcement was made. With next month's update, Sega would be introducing ways to skip the grind. These opportunities would be offered through microtransactions. They let you pay to finish the story, unlock skill points, and level a class to 70. They're mostly there for people not interested in going through the motions again, either because they have another character they play, or because they were banned. Regardless of who the target consumer is, the fact that these passes exist at all in the game's short lifespan means 3 things. 1, Sega isn't confident in their product because they don't think playing it is fun. 2, they designed the early game experience so poorly that they had to provide a way to ignore most of it. And 3, they want to milk the player base for all they're worth. These shortcuts are typically introduced as a game gets bloated, usually years after release, because reaching the endgame requires a decent investment of your time. That isn't the case with NGS, however. Getting to endgame takes roughly 8 to 10 hours if you skip all the cutscenes, and that includes going through all the cocoons for skill points. You can catch up to the game's story in 1 weekend and hit max level just doing that. How do I know this? That's how it was when I played on my new account. These passes are pointless and can even hurt the game in ways you wouldn't imagine. While they don't provide an advantage over others, they can still be detrimental to other people. If new players are buying these, they won't learn about the game naturally. They won't bother with the upgrading system because they're handed decent gear, and they'll fail to understand the game's many quirks too, especially when it comes to classes. What this will result in is new players being unable to hold their own in endgame content, which is what the pass unlocks for you. They'll basically drag down whatever party they're in, and if they happen to try solo content like dual quests, they'll just get their shit pushed in and probably leave. Paying to skip the grind only makes sense if you know what you're doing already, but the game doesn't make any attempt to let you know this. It just preys on people with open wallets. But at least the pass isn't shoved in your face every time you level up. Anyway, I could understand offering shortcuts if the game was like 5 years old and we had some stuff to do, but you know. Honestly, if forced to, the only pass I would ever consider buying would be the one that gives you the skill points, because fuck cocoons, especially the maze ones. Those can get sodomized with a cactus covered in mercury. I hate them so much. But because I hate Sega more, I push through them, so I wouldn't have to give them any money. Because at one point I almost did, and would have probably justified it by saying I used it as a business expense. But that's too much work to save $5 or something.
Dream house, ultimate dream house. Come inside and
June was a bit of a crazy month. Not only was that when I had to start over from square one because I was falsely banned,
I get the feeling like I've seen you somewhere before. Just can't place where, though.
but it was also when the big update we spoke about earlier was scheduled to release. Player expectations for this one were through the roof, with most people betting that the Ultra Evolution update would fix the game's fundamental issues. But when the update finally dropped, the disappointment was immeasurable. The Ultra Evolution update didn't really fix anything, it just added player housing and other features for people who take screenshots. And adding insult to injury, shortly before the update released, Sega renamed it to version 2, further emphasizing the importance of the update in the game's history. Suffice to say, people were fucking pissed. A lot of the comments and videos I came across stressed that deceptive marketing and a lack of transparency is what made this update a colossal fuck-up. And while that may be true to some degree because the title they chose for the update would normally be reserved for major revisions or upgrades, I don't think Sega is the only one at fault here. The players share some blame too. Yes, the title Ultra Evolution carries a lot of weight, no doubt about it, and it seems like it would be something grand and spectacular, but the fact still remains that everyone projected their wishes onto what the update would bring. They did this instead of taking what Sega said about it at face value. Don't believe me? Well, in December, when the Ultra Evolution update was first revealed, the devs stated that the June update would mostly be focused on the creative space.
Key content.
And then in April, when the game's producer was let out of the basement for the first time in years, along with apologizing for the game's shitty beginnings, he let us know what else was planned for June. Based on what they said in these headlines, I find it hard to believe that anybody felt misled. I didn't hear anything from these headlines that even remotely hinted towards a major overhaul of some sort. So unless the people who thought otherwise watched a secret headline or were listening to this one on an undiscovered audio frequency, they may be showing early signs of being schizophrenic. Either way, both sides fucked up. The community mistakenly interpreted the update as a sign of a complete overhaul, and Sega chose one of, if not the most inappropriate titles for an update in gaming history. Another part of the Ultra Dramalution update revolves around a comment made by the community manager G-Wiz, who not only revealed that Sega viewed version 2 as an era and not just an update, but that some content scheduled for August was meant to come out in June. The community did not take this very well, and started to demand more transparency because up until this point, no one had heard about the delayed content, or Sega ever calling the Ultra Evolution update an era. What I find funny about this, though, is that G-Wiz was doing exactly what the players wanted, being transparent about the delays and the other thing. They didn't have to say anything at all, but they did to try and establish goodwill. But nobody was having any of that. Everyone was just mad for the sake of being mad. Or maybe they were mad because yet again they weren't paying attention.
In June, NGS will step into a new future with the Ultra Evolution update, aka PSO2 New Genesis version 2.
A new future. A new era. A new Genesis. Sorry, that last one was really cheesy. It really was just a lose-lose situation for G-Wiz. If they didn't say anything at all, the community would have bitched about wanting more transparency. And even when they did share an explanation, people still complained. It really makes me wonder how the community wants Sega to act. Are they supposed to just list out everything they're working on in advance so you can jump at their throat when they change plans? Come on, don't be stupid. Anyway, going back to my first point, I find it silly that more was expected from this update. Sega clearly laid out what it consisted of. And again, while I can't blame anyone for thinking otherwise because Ultra Evolution, version 2, at the same time I'd expect their brain to register that this is Sega we're talking about. They don't really make smart decisions. Anywho, if you've played the game for some time now, you would know that whatever Sega reveals in the roadmap is pretty much what we'll get. So expecting a last-minute announcement regarding a gameplay overhaul would be like expecting the New York City subway system to be clean. It just ain't happening. Another thing I saw were people complaining about how Sega advertised the update. Many were mad that they hyped it up for so long, as if they expected Sega's marketing department to sit on its ass or something. Like, come on guys, really? Do we really need to go over this? That's kind of what the marketing team's job is. You can't be angry over that. The only thing you can fault them on, however, is choosing a very inappropriate title for the update, if they were even the ones to choose it at all. You also can't fault Sega for changing the update's name 2 months out, because from the second it was revealed back in December, they let everyone know the title was tentative, and they reiterated this several times throughout the year. Tentative means subject to change. It doesn't matter what their reasoning is for changing changing it. If they felt that Ultra Evolution didn't accurately represent what they were going for, course correcting is the right thing to do. Why anyone would bitch about that is ridiculous. Relabeling the update and redefining it as an era was well within Sega's rights to do so. You don't have to like what they did, or how they did it, or even agree with the terms they used, but you can't say what they did was wrong. You can, however, be disappointed with how they labeled it and how they interpret the game's state. Because in truth, it makes no sense to label this Ultra Evolution, or even version 2 in my opinion. Nothing they added with this patch warrants the inclusion of it. Version 2 should have been saved for an update that touched up on the game's core, like improving the gameplay loop, adding new photon arts, getting us off Alio, etc. But to use it on the update where you add Barbie Dreamhouse and other screenshot content, that just seems weird. But at the end of the day, what you need to understand is, Sega views their game differently than we do. Their perception of what a second version looks like, or what would kickstart it, greatly differs from ours. Instead of seeing V2 as a humongous single patch that addresses fundamental issues, adds new content, and rebalances things, their idea of a new version involves an evolution over time. What's included in that evolution? Well, going off the new roadmap, it appears as though they're trying to push out content at a faster pace, specifically when it comes to the story and combat activities, which is a good sign, but then again, it looks like most of what's here happens to be limited time content. Obviously, Sega is working on more stuff behind the scenes, but if they stick to this roadmap, I don't see things really getting much better. So with that out of the way, maybe now we can go over what version 2 introduced. Obviously, you know about the creative space, you already saw the Barbie Dreamhouse, but you probably haven't seen this cowgirl milking farm I found, so there you go. People sure are creative, even though I don't think the creative space was a necessary addition, and they could have probably gotten away with just giving us little apartments again, like I thought they would, since you literally have one in Central City. I did have some fun with this, and ended up spending about 10 hours figuring out the system while putting my first house together. Before I was banned anyway. I ain't doing that shit again, they can go fuck themselves. But when I did get the hang of it, it was kind of fun. It reminded me of my childhood when I used to play The Sims 1 all day, mostly because the song that was playing in the background sounded like the building theme from that. But anyway, for what it's worth, the system, while very obtuse, is very complex and unrestricted. There's a lot of freedom here, and while I will admit it can produce some amazing results, and I expect the system to be improved later down the line, I don't think the effort put into this will pay off in the long run, because when push comes to shove, players would rather interact with content the developers make, not make the content themselves. Doing so would involve investing time in learning these systems' complexities, and with such a small player count to begin with, the effort required to learn this in depth just seems wasted. The main appeal of the creative space is to share what you build with others, but if no one else is around to see what you made, why bother? Another aspect I think turns people away from this is the fact that it's online only. If this mode was playable offline, I'm sure many more people would try it out, but due to the game's laughably bad current state and ban-happy staff, there's no guarantee that what you make will even be around that long. I just don't see many people giving this a try. Hardly anyone even finished the tutorial, and this is on ship 2. Looking past that, the fact that it's in the game now means more developer resources will be allocated to creating content for it, like furniture and shit. By adding this, they've essentially tripled their workload. They also let everyone know that this feature will be one of their main focuses going forward. And if you think otherwise, well, consult the roadmap. They dedicated a section to it. What's crazy is that most of the player base doesn't even give a shit about this. So if you were one of those people and you were disappointed by this update, I can sympathize with you, because many of us have been patiently waiting for more meaningful, replayable content that lasts longer than a week, that isn't this. We want stuff that involves combat, not more ways to take screenshots and have sex with men. Sure, the other content added this month entertained us a little, but it wasn't enough in my opinion. The Sonic collab quest was really cool and could have easily stayed, but they vaulted that faster than the Hedgehog himself. I didn't even get to play both of them. I was too busy trying to level back up. The new story segment pushed things forward, but only lasted a hot minute, and the new enemy type, the Starless, while miles ahead of the dolls in both visuals and gameplay, are still reskins of the enemies we've fought before. As for the other stuff from this patch, no one really cares about the portable holograms or cell shading. Or maybe the whales do, I don't know. Basically, the June update sucked if you were expecting things to get better in the short term. It was a huge slap in the face for anyone not interested in playing house or taking screenshots. The core audience that had stuck with NGS through thick and thin ended up getting benched, pushed aside in favor of whales and porn addicts that have money to burn and people to fuck. The only aspect of the game that evolved with this update, in my opinion, was Sega's wallet milking strategy. Okay, well, maybe you can argue that it did evolve some other things like the personal quarters from the base game, but when you say you're evolving something, that implies you're gradually improving something already there, not adding an enhanced version of a feature from the previous game.
But actually, the game is called...
The two other points worth going over in this patch would be giving players the ability to reset their skill points at any time without paying, and separating the base game into DLC. The first thing was a nice gesture, but separating the base game on PC ended up causing more harm than good. Yes, it lowers the amount of bandwidth and drive space necessary to play NGS, but for those of us that would want to play the superior base game again, even if we had it installed already, we had to download it again. Forcing players to download 60 gigabytes of data they already have is kinda fucked up, especially considering some people have data caps. This decision hurt the dwindling base game player count for sure. Man, June was a fucking mess. But at least we can have sex in private now. Let's see if July is any better. Well, it did add some stuff for combat bros, so I guess it's a start. Along with the new Urgent Quest, this month was carried by the game's 11th anniversary. You heard me right, the 11th anniversary, because they consider NGS the same game as PSO2. Lord help me. The usual happened. They decorated Central City, gave players free scratch tickets, fueling their dopamine addictions, and facilitated a way for everyone to play catch-up through the distribution of free high-level gear. The highlight this month was definitely the limited time quizzes, and it wasn't just because they reused an old concert song from the base game. They were actually very unique by NGS standards, and gave players something to do aside from farming monsters. They even let you hang out with Ngoku, but not just one, there was two! The only thing I didn't like about the quizzes were, funny enough, the questions. They predominantly featured obscure trivia that required a cheat sheet to answer. Yes, I'm serious, the community resorted to building a cheat sheet just so people could get decent rewards. And I don't blame them for doing it, because like, who the fuck cares or even knows how old Ina's father is? Why is that useless fact even worth remembering? The dude's fucking dead. At least, we think he is. He's probably not. But still, why not ask us how old Ina is or something? Oh wait, we all know why. In other news, the game's community manager GWiz announced that they were stepping away from their position, and there was much rejoice. Fucking finally. I'm not even sure how they managed to stick around this long with such an extensive rap sheet. I guess Sega doesn't really give a shit about what their employees do. Either way, they aren't dealing with people anymore, which is a good thing. In the long run, I don't see this really fixing much, but at least going forward, the PR disaster count will be kept to a minimum. But even then, there's no guarantee. Come August, expectations were high yet again. The content that was delayed from the Ultra Evolution update made its grand debut, in the form of a standing quest. Wait, what? Standing quest? What the fuck's a standing quest? Are you supposed to stand around and do nothing? Because I'm pretty sure everyone in Central City is already doing that. Is this what Sega calls content that isn't limited time only? Because standing around means you're not going anywhere? Am I misinterpreting this? Am I the one who's retarded? Or is it just another example of Sega giving content an unnecessary second name, just for the sake of confusing everybody? Cocoon? Trainia. Elite? Megalodics. Veteran? Dread. Malevolent? Gigantics. Ultra Evolution? Version 2? And now they're referring to permanent content as standing? Why? Why not just call it staying? Why even call it something like that at all? Just say you're adding a new quest for us to play. Oh wait, that's right, they can't, because they add so much limited time shit that they need to specify when things are actually staying. What's next? They're gonna give the new Lucille Exploration quest? They did give it a second name. I'm going to fucking kill myself. The Lucille Expedition, standing quest, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, I don't care, in my opinion, is the first piece of content we can truly consider endgame. By NGS standards, it was designed very well, and it addresses several of the game's major issues, the most critical being the lack of highly replayable, meaningful content. Each run of this quest is unique. Many aspects of it are randomly generated, such as the rooms, the overall map layout, the enemies you fight, and the buffs received for both your party and the boss monster. These change regularly, although I'm not sure how often. If I'm not mistaken, I think the buffs and the bosses change each day, but but I could be wrong, and I don't really feel like checking, so fuck off. Your goal in this quest is to acquire as many party buffs as possible before the time limit is reached. When the clock hits 0, the game sends you on a one-way trip to the boss fight. You only get 6 minutes to strengthen your party. The buffs are received by clearing objectives, which vary from room to room. Some contain puzzles, others just ask you to kill shit. I prefer the latter more, because puzzles are honestly the last thing I want to do in this game. The buffs available are found in the top left corner under the map. They're color and number coded, so even if you're disabled, retarded, or an erotic role player, sorry, that last one was redundant, you'll know what you get for clearing a room. Obviously, there's a hierarchy of importance when it comes to which buffs you want to prioritize, and because they stack, you'll want to focus on whatever is most beneficial for the party, which is usually an attack boost of some sort. When you're forced into the boss fight, you'll have a few minutes to kill it. What sets this quest apart from the others is, even if you fail to complete it, you're still given something at the end. Your loot is based on how much remaining health the boss has. This means that regardless of how the quest ends, you're rewarded for your efforts, which is something I really appreciate because one of the other pain points of NGS is that this game doesn't respect the player's time. This quest does, however. It's a huge step in the right direction on all fronts, and I'm very satisfied with it, even if I only do play this game somewhat casually. My only complaint with it, however, shockingly, has nothing to do with the content itself. It's regarding the people that I play with. A lot of these jackasses just do whatever they want, running around like headless chickens, ignoring the good buffs and taking on rooms by themselves. And I don't mean the puzzle rooms that can be completed by one person, I mean combat rooms. Then they die. It's like a fucking free-for-all half the time I play this. Everyone's just working against one another as if it were a competition. What this uncoordinated shitfest results in is getting our asses fucked 6 ways from Sunday, either because we don't have enough buffs to kill the boss in time, or because so many people get knocked out before we even get there, putting us at a huge disadvantage. You only get a certain amount of lives each time you play this quest, so if someone's being retarded and keeps dying constantly, they jeopardize the run for the whole party. I know, this is just a skill issue, and one I can easily tackle if I had friends, but you people are fucking crazy. The TLDR for Lucille, wait, the standing, hold on. The Halpha Environment Testing Zone Survey is good, and the music kicks ass too. Now let's just see how long its appeal lasts. Not the music, but the quest. What are you, fucking stupid? A week into August, a high-level quest was added that pit you up against a new boss. It even got its own introductory cutscene that plays when you log in, and that's where my experience with it ends. I wasn't able to play this. The battle power requirement is too high, and I don't have the money or time to improve my gear. That's what happens when you get banned. You start over from square one. It's all good though. I'm not really missing much. From what I've read, the loot from this fight is really shitty, and if that's the case, who fucking cares? Maybe I'll play it one day, when the next set of seasonal welfare weapons come out to push me over the battle power requirement, but we'll see. Some other noteworthy additions for August include being able to add and upgrade preset skills to your equipment, which I don't really care for because min-maxing in this game is fucking stupid. The addition of the Alliance creative space, so the 3 people that are still active in your alliance can take turns building some monstrosity that never gets finished. A new tile set featuring the Retem theme that nobody cares about. Weapon camos being added to old content that no one played anymore. 2 cutscenes continuing Chapter 6, and some quality of life changes, some of which may be foreshadowing something. It's unanimous that NGS doesn't really work well as an open world game, and I think the changes I'm about to speak of prove that the devs finally came to terms with this. Along with giving players more teleport destinations, which lowers travel time overall, they also added the quest counter to the game's menu. These condense the game tremendously. Yes, their quality of life changes first and foremost, but in the long run there's so much more. They're an indicator that Sega is making an effort to reduce the game's scale, which is for the best. The open world setting was cool and very ambitious at first, but the dev team's lack of direction and familiarity with the genre only resulted in lengthy wait times for just about everything, and most of what we did get didn't even make use of the open world mechanic. It was either locked away in a virtual reality room or instanced areas using the overworld as a backdrop. Having the quest counter in the menu is certainly convenient, but in my opinion placing it there opens up a can of worms. It helps remedy the no one else is around to queue issue, because now people have no excuse not to, but it renders several NPCs pointless, physically segregates the community further, gives players one less reason to visit a hub, and enables lazy people, who are just gonna ask for more to be added to the menus later. It may not seem that bad now, but just wait. If this receives positive feedback, which it will, you can expect the menu bloat to increase as Sega bends the knee, ham-fisting all the other hub features into it. Maybe not all at once, but they will eventually get there. I can see it now. High difficulty menu expedition quests. Find the designated selection before the timer timer runs out. BP required? 10,000. Okay, now I'm getting a little ridiculous, but you get my point. Let's move on to what I believe is the best quality of life change in gaming history. Blocking players now sends them to the Shadow Realm, or as we New Yorkers call it, the Bronx. You know, I may not be able to play Space Police anymore, but at least with this I can still pretend to be a cop. Only instead of killing bugs, I'm busting prostitutes. This is the real endgame experience. Blocking monstrosities like this. The true Ultra Evolution update. This almost makes up for Sega falsely banning me. Almost. By now, you're probably wondering if NGS will always be a disaster. Well, it really depends on your bird's eye view, how you look at the game as a whole. Most people who think the game will never be in a good state push the idea that this will always be the case as long as NGS favors an open world over instance dungeons. Others think it's due to the direction of the game's development, favoring scratch tickets and social features over everything else. I agree with both of these takes, but to me what really determines whether NGS will always be a disaster is what the future will bring, what the community is like, and obviously the game's management. If NGS evolves into nothing but limited time events, creative space additions, and social feature upgrades, it will never recover from its terrible reputation. What they're doing right now pays the bills, but it's not sustainable in the long run. If Sega ever wants to attract both new and returning players, they have to tackle the fundamental issues first. We've waited almost 3 years and nothing really changed. Okay, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but then again, am I really? Because when you get down to it, what really matters hasn't changed. The gameplay loop, the drop rates, the crafting systems, the reused assets, all of these and more haven't changed for the better, and if Sega isn't planning to deviate from their strategy, like they said in their headline video, what do people have to look forward to? The eventual shutdown of the base game after they finish porting over all of its cosmetics? A new type of bed to have sex in? More ways to spend money? It's clear to everyone that despite recent additions, NGS is still not moving in the direction the core audience is happy with. But if Sega doesn't really care, what other choice do people have than to leave? If the whales get what they want in the end, you can expect NGS to become a wasteland, even more than it currently is. And once the overall player count drops low enough because everyone's suffering from FOMO fatigue, the devs will refocus their efforts on appeasing the whales because they'll be the only people left, staying not out of love for the game, but because they suffer from sunk cost and gambling problems. The game isn't bringing in new players regardless of what they try, and once they realize that their efforts to grow the game are fruitless because they never bothered to fix the issues that drove people away in the first place, they won't be inclined to spend more money on it than they already have to. Like to advertise it, for instance. Remember when they did that? Remember when the sponsored videos for version 2 did nothing in terms of increasing the player count? Because everyone commenting basically said the game was still shit? What a colossal fuck up that was. Half of the videos they sponsored had botted views. Whoever was in charge of this campaign should be fired. Especially after asking Nerd Slayer of all people to shill the game when he will eventually cover it in his Death of a Game series. Jesus Christ, what were they thinking?
What were they thinking? What the hell were they thinking? What were they thinking? What the fuck were they thinking? What were they thinking?
Alright, so what about the community? Well, I'm gonna be honest, the last 3 years are the result of the community being complacent, sticking around every time Sega asked them to wait for more content, and rewarding their terrible choices in management style by continuing to fund the game. This doesn't only apply to Global, however, but JP as well. These aren't the only mistakes the community has made. Another would be letting the Global team curate feedback before sending it to Sega of Japan. Everyone knows they cherry pick what they send, but nobody brings attention to this. If you need proof, just look at the headline questions. That's given it away since day one, and based on what GWiz said in the last Headline Plus stream, version 2 was the result of our direct feedback. But the thing is, nobody asked for any of that in the first place. What, do you really think the content-deprived fans begged Sega to prioritize creative spaces, cell shading, and stickers instead of addressing the game's core issues? Did they really want Sega to compromise the quality of other updates because the creative space and everything else was all hands on deck? Please, someone, find me a player who asked. And don't show me something from the Discord server, which is another thing we need to talk about. Why would anyone leave feedback there if the developers don't even use it? Do you really think Sega of Japan gives a shit about what Global wants? Do you really think they're going to sit there and have someone translate all the feedback and even consider it when the Japanese fanbase is their main cash cow? What's more, given Sega of Japan's poor communication level, as expressed by the Global employees themselves, they probably don't even know it exists, and even if they do, leaving feedback there is pointless anyway because the global moderation team deletes shit they don't agree with. Another issue with the community is how shameless it is. Of course, sexy characters are to be expected in a game that sells breast implants, stripper poles, chokers, and femboy outfits, but at this point, you guys have taken it a bit too far. I mean, look, I like giant tits as much as the next guy, and when a character shows some skin, it doesn't really bother me. But when this Rule 34 and DeviantArt tier shit becomes the norm, you can kinda see why people would be turned off from playing, especially when NGS isn't even advertised to be that kind of game. Sometimes it's not even about the giant breasts people smother each other with, but rather the public flirting and roleplay that happens. It's fucking cringe. And don't even get me started on the sex mods. Once new players learn that half of the player base fucks one another, they'll hightail it out of there. That shit's just weird. And please don't tell me this doesn't happen, because even the fucking Twitter account acknowledges what goes on in Central City. Over 10,000 people, including the game's moderators, hang out in the modding Discord that has a very active NSFW section, so this kind of stuff is more common than you think. And although the inclusion of the creative space made things a little better, because now people use those as sex dens, Central City still looks like Streetwalker Central. That's not good for first impressions, or returning ones. I can understand why some people don't like sharing that they play NGS. They don't want to be associated with financially irresponsible, super horny, sex-deprived weeaboos. But then again, it could be worse. They could be associating themselves with Sega employees, who not only want to inject people with estrogen, but also engage in a lot of erotic roleplay despite saying otherwise, including the higher-ups who do that kind of stuff with people pretending to be children. That's right, to the surprise of absolutely fucking no one, Sega is infested with predators. Global is a swamp that needed to be drained yesterday. Sega should just axe the team entirely and handle the localization themselves. It's clear that Californians and their friends cannot be trusted. They ruin everything they touch, if they didn't molest it already. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Sega of Japan was kept in the dark about all of this. They get their feedback through the company anyway, so of course Sega of America would just omit all the bad shit. That's probably been the case for a while too, because if you talk to some people who played previous games in the series, they all have stories to tell about the people in charge. Like how the moderators of Phantasy Star Universe used to make wiki pages dedicated to people they didn't like. Sega really needs to look into the activity of the global team, and preferably clean house. They also need to stop banning people over criticism, because holy fuck, that's some 1984 shit. After 3 long and stressful years, I cannot in good faith recommend this game. 5 things keep me from doing so. 1. The fundamental issues were never addressed. 2. Meaningful content isn't released on a regular basis. 3. The poorly behaved global team is still around. 4. The toxic and degenerate community. And 5. The fact that Sega bans people over criticism. Until these points are addressed, the game will remain as is. Unfinished, unappealing, and unpopular. It's been said for the umpteenth time. NGS is far from what it could be and should be. Everyone, including myself, desperately wants it to be a good game. But the chance of that ever happening is just as likely as Nintendo supporting Melee tournaments. NGS isn't known as a Phantasy Star game. It's known as a directionless, wallet-draining time sink attached to an online psychiatric ward in a red light district. NGS is a disgrace to both the MMO genre and the Phantasy Star name, and regardless of your feelings towards me, I believe that's something we can all agree on. This game isn't what any of us want it to be. Will that ever change? Who knows? Will it ever reach its full potential? Probably not. Will it always be a disaster? I think so, but that's also up to you to decide. I applaud you for accompanying me on this unprecedented and lengthy journey. I never expected to get this far or turn one video into a trilogy. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It was a great learning experience for me, and I hope you learned something too, like not to leave the pizza in the oven. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a like, a comment, tell me what you guys think, and if you want to see what I have in store, feel free to subscribe. Also, if you're interested in trying out a Discord alternative that doesn't charge you to use basic features like animated profile pictures and emojis, you can check out my Guilded server. The link for that will be in the description and in a comment down below. Just make sure you download the app if you're going to use it. The web client is good, but the app is so much better. Also, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to all of my patrons. You guys are the best. That's all I got for you today. It's been real, guys. May your drops be rare and your accounts be safe. I'll see you next time. Later. Emergency code. Disaster completed.